Alright, let's see here. Antivirus check, VPN check, firewall check. Alright, no stray viruses are getting into this video and forcing me to do jokes related to an after-school activity about books of any sort. Alright. Okay, so let's take a look at the other victim of Saban's incompetence. Yeah, I know I said last time I wanted to avoid bringing up this company that one time defined my childhood, but wow, 19 episodes cut? I read somewhere that they did suffer from severe budget slashing after Smile didn't pan out, so maybe I could understand, especially if they preferred concentrating on stuff like Power Rangers. Which, by the way, how's that working out for them? Oh, right. Yep, Saban lost their big cash cow along with this franchise right after their second, and thankfully last hack job of this great franchise was in the can. While I realize this show is very divisive, no anime after 2010 should have 2 different episode lists on Wikipedia. Alright, with that final nail driven in, let's shift focus to this show's actual production. Directorial duties were taken up by Go Koga, whom, in spite of sounding like a Garo character, is a very kind of director in my opinion. I mean, I've heard good things about Happily Monsters, but he had no previous experience with any sort of magical girl anime outside of one assistant director position. His head writer Ryota Yamaguchi, on the other hand, was far more credible. On top of handling the series comm for shows like Blue Exorcist and the underrated Diamond Daydreams, he also wrote for Sailor Moon. Sure, it was stars, but hey, I kind of liked it. And he also wrote for Ami's First Love, so that kind of makes up for some of that show's more questionable elements. Kind of. Still, with all that in mind, it should come as no surprise that this was by far one of the most divisive Precure seasons ever, with many either loving or hating it without a lot in between. Which camp do I fall into? Well, let's take a look at Doki Doki Precure. Run a full system scan. Our season opened with a literal bang. A lone Precure managed to fight off a couple of this season's Monsters of the Week, even managing to avoid turning this into a late night anime. However, in spite of her efforts, it was too little, too late, as her kingdom had already fallen. Wow, talk about starting your show off on such a powerful emotional note. A warrior forced to face the reality that all of her efforts were in vain, as thousands were now under the subjugation of a tyrannical and nightmarish force. Oh boy, I can't wait to see how they follow up on this sort of emotional moment. Precure OPs have stronger whiplash than the end of Ivy's sword. I mean, don't get me wrong, it's a nice and catchy tune sung by Miria of the Cinderella Girls herself, but come on guys, at least try to read between the lines. So, after that little mood killer, we cut over to the Clover Tower, no relation, I think, a huge radio tower that students from First Ogai Middle School were visiting. Their teacher wasn't with them as he was taking a nap on the bus. Hope the school provides you with a nice pension there, dude. The president in question was this girl, Mana Aida. Yes, I realize that she's a bit of a base-breaking character, but let's save talking about that for part 2. People already complain that these videos are too long as is. What I will mention is that Mana's voice actress, Hitomi Nabatame, much like Nana Mizuki, is a huge Precure fan. Her fandom stemmed all the way back to Futari, where she auditioned and eventually landed the role of a minor supporting character in that show. In an interview, she even admitted to crying tears of joy as soon as she got the call confirming her role as this season's Pink. So, good for her, and her enthusiasm for the role is reflected in her acting. There is also something else about Nabatame's personality that got reflected in Mana, but let's save that for later. Anyway, while Mana tried to help out everyone she could, she was eventually reined in by her VP and close friend, Rika Hishikawa. She had known Mana for years, and her impulsive nature to help out others, as she wanted to help spread the love to everyone. Appropriate since her surname is a homonym for It's Love. I will never get tired of that clip. Mana also happened to be a fan of the Precure for the prologue, who was now under the guise of a pop idol named Makoto Kenzaki and— Wait, earlier we saw that she had a spade motif, and her surname is— Oh child, you have opened up the floodgates. Let the memes flow. Anyway, during the commotion, Makoto dropped her hair accessory, but Mana picked it up and returned it to her. Later, she would stumble upon a very similar accessory being sold by this guy, Joe Okada. Get it? As in Joker? And no, I'm not gonna make reference to the one from Smile. There's already enough uncomfortable implications with this dude. Anyway, he gave her the trinket for free, initially to Mana's objection. Well, as long as you're willing to shop around on eBay, it's really not that expensive, especially compared to some older Transformer toys. I don't have a problem. Later, one of the patrons of the tower was growing impatient and was considering cutting in line, but ultimately didn't. This show is borrowing from two of my favorite Kamen Rider series ever. Where's the popcorn? But yeah, just like the greed of O's, the agents of the Selfish Kingdom like Ira here could take the normally restrained desires of their victims and let them run wild as monsters of the week. Yeah, I'm pretty sure this dude has nothing on SpongeBob's boss. Anyway, the monster known as the Jikochu made its way to the top of the tower. Realizing that a girl she had met earlier was in danger, Mana gave chase by running up the stairs of a 999 meter tall tower and mostly keeping up with this monster crab that ran straight up the elevator shaft. Again, I'm trying to save this for next time, but seriously, Mana, don't start using superpowers before you even meet your fairy partner. Speaking of which, the fairies of this season, Charles, Raquel, and Lance, had sensed the approach of the Selfish Kingdom agents and made their way to the tower. Mana managed to rescue the girl from Mr. Krabs Jr. and tried to defeat him by giving him a scolding, and surprisingly, it kind of worked. At least long enough for Charles to arrive and offer to become Mana's partner by taking a page out of the OG Fairies handbook and turning into the transformation trinket, albeit updated for the 2010s. Mana, wrong show. You know what? Never mind. You paid tribute to Axel. You're cool in my book. Anyway, may as well just leave this in the hands of a Precure whose name just so happens to be a synonym for Blade. However, as it turned out, another agent of the Selfish Kingdom, Mamo, was also at the tower, and she made another crab almost exactly like the last one, only a different color and pitch shift. Okay, now it's starting to feel like a low-budget tokusatsu. Realizing that her overzealousness led to her savior ending up in this predicament, Mana again attempted to transform, and this time, she managed to figure out the gimmick behind her transformation trinket. We roll right into the next episode with Mana having her first fight with the agents. Do not finish the rest of that sentence unless you want to lose a head. Luckily, her opponents were idiots who couldn't work together. Man, Krillin is going through some rough times after 18 kicked him out. Makoto managed to escape from the Jikochu's grip when it tried to throw her over the side of the tower, but it still managed to drag her down with it. Mana took quick action and saved her. She then proceeded to purify the totem crabby using one of the cheesiest finishers in all of Precure, and that's saying something. Then again, I guess it could have been worse. She could have spun around like a top with some really outdated special effects. With their job done, Mana tried to befriend the Cure of Spades. Isn't this supposed to be the other way around? Heck, Makoto's reason for being a loner was even kinda similar to Hajime's, as she didn't want to involve anyone else in her problems. Later that day, Rika, who had seen her friend try to confront the Jikochu, again tried to call out Mana's reckless tendencies by comparing her to Oscar Wilde's Happy Prince. The titular prince was a statue adorned with made jewels. With the help of a swallow that he could somehow talk to, don't ask, it's a fairy tale, he shared his made jewels with the impoverished masses. I remind you, these jewels were embedded into his mold. So he was essentially asking the swallow to pull out parts of his body to share with everyone to ensure their happiness. Isn't it nice how this show is carrying on Smile's most important theme, that old fairy tales are messed up? In Rika's eyes, Mana was the prince who was slowly destroying herself by committing to all of these selfless acts. Not wanting to worry her friend more than necessary, Mana tried to explain everything to Rika.
私に不思議な力を与えてくれたのよ。だったら私は白ウサギの後を追いかけて。
I got nothing. I just love that exchange. Later, Mana tried to explain everything to Rika, but was pulled aside by the fairies. Yeah, a little late on the draw there, guys. Even Candy was more efficient than you three. But yeah, thanks to the fairies' warnings, Mana was able to figure out why Makoto was being so reclusive and agreed to keep her superheroine identity a secret. Though Rika's understanding and kindness didn't exactly make things easier for the girl, and she almost broke down and was going to tell her everything until... Eh? Okay, I know the fairies in these shows can have some weird verbal tics, but that really did sound like the Ondo language. Seriously, if you know nothing about blade memes, go look them up, you'll have a good time. Elsewhere, a student was running late and was going to miss the first bell because of a traffic light. Wasn't this guy an Ultimate Muscle? Which, Koga actually directed one of those episodes. Huh. Anyway, Mana tried to take on road rage by herself, but Rika insisted in helping her, stating that she wanted to become Mana's swallow. But wasn't the swallow the first one to... You know what? Never mind. They'll bring it up later. Together, they managed to slow him down, but Mana still needed to defeat it, and Rika wasn't going anywhere, so she did something I wish a lot more superheroes would do, and basically just said to hell with secret identities. Mana held up well until the monster pulled out the most obvious trick in the book and froze her in place with his red light. Things looked grim until Rika noticed the monster's walk button on its... Wow, this thing really is an Ultimate Muscle character. She saved her and Mana purified it, thus our lone heroine now had a new partner by her side. Episode 3 opened with Rika actually doing something pretty smart and trying to analyze Mana's magical items. She could only really point out the blatantly obvious, but good job being proactive at least. However, while they were cleaning the lab, they forgot one of their furry little friends. Spoilers, they completely forget about him until the very end of the episode. It's the little things that get the most laughs out of me. Later that night, Raquel offered to become Rika's partner now that she was in on their activities. If that's the case, she should probably start working on her awkward screams. Unfortunately, she ended up turning them down as she didn't feel she was suited for the position as someone who didn't even have her own life in check. Which, yeah, was kinda true as both her parents were seldom at home with her due to their respective occupations. Thus, being both an independent adolescent girl and a superheroine would be a tall order. That plus covering up her dad's tracks. I seriously doubt half that stuff was just given to him. Meanwhile, at an interdimensional bowling alley, because why not, the agents of the Selfish Kingdom were already sulking over their losses. Not helped when another agent, Belle, decided to rub it in their faces. Do you mean direct orders from board? Yes, that is in fact President Charisma voicing him, and yet he's not going to be the villain of this episode. And thus, we miss out on a great opportunity to have him get into a super choppy argument with the Warrior of the Diamond. Speaking of whom, Rika met up with Mana while mailing a response letter to her father, and together they met Joe as he was setting up his new shop. Is there such a thing as being too genre savvy? Still, he decided to give Rika her own transformation trigger, which gave her a little bit of a seizure. And she rightfully tried to turn down accepting anything from this dude, but still ended up taking it thanks to some good old Destiny talk and all that. Back at that same mailbox from earlier. Speak the creed, brother! Yeah, obviously this guy's heart got turned into a Jikochu, but I'm totally siding with this goat. Unfortunately, amongst the mail it was eating was Rika's letter. Mon tried to protect it, as well as all the remaining letters, and ended up getting on Lamb Chop's bad side. Seeing her friend in trouble, the swallow decided to take a more proactive role. Together they defeated Jikochu, and that was pretty much it for the episode. Oh, except for the fact that they completely forgot about Lance. Luckily, this girl with chocolate cornets in her hair knew exactly where he was. This is Alice Yotsuba, an old friend of Rika and Mana, and an insanely young entrepreneur. Yeah, remember that 999-meter tall tower from the first episode? I'd kill to see a money off between her and Seto Kaiba. She and her butler with the most awesome stash ever, Sebastian, had invited Ma and Rika back to her mansion to discuss the little matter of them being superheroines. Yeah, as it turned out, on top of stumbling upon Lance, she had also found footage of Ma's first transformation from the Clover Tower security cameras. She and Sebastian had kept all of this to themselves and would continue to protect their secrets, Alice's only condition being that she be allowed to become a Precure producer. Sure, why not? You can't do a worse job than Naito or Tanaka. Meanwhile, at the interdimensional bowling alley, Iro is laying out his frustrations over his latest loss. Yeah, try saying that again in about 20 episodes. Still, he tried to prove himself with his son in Jikochu attack, but Alice's information network managed to immediately track him down. As a result, the Precure were able to immediately confront him. Lance, already realizing he had found the ideal partner, tried to pair with Alice, who just sat down and drank some tea. Granted, she really didn't need to get involved, as the battle quickly swung in the Precure's favor. Curse you, Soldier Boy, and your cheap Chinese knockoffs! But yeah, obviously, Alice could just act as a perfectly fine non-combatant supporter of the Precure. But Lance still wasn't satisfied and saw her as an ideal Precure partner. She even already had a Cure Lovelace that Joe just gave her at some point. This dude is just Memeland in disguise, isn't he? Why did you come to my Caldia? Still, Alice Kotowaru'd. Mana and Rika later explained a traumatic experience back in elementary school that probably shaped all three of them, but in particular Alice. Basically, a couple of little brats had made a young Mana cry, and Alice put them in their places. Yeah, normally I'm against violence against children, but if you're gonna bring your big brother to do all the fighting for you, then really you're just asking for it. And since Alice had learned several martial arts at a young age, yeah, she mopped the floor with them. Still, whether they deserved it or not, no one should ever feel actual pleasure from harming others. Afraid of losing herself to that rage again, Alice gave up on martial arts. However, thanks to some encouragement from Sebastian and Lance, Alice recalled the words of her grandfather, Captain Picard, and yes, that's his Japanese dub actor, in which he gave the standard superhero quote about power and responsibility and all that jazz. With that, Cure Money joined the fight. Bit of a cliche intro arc, but hey, at least she got over angst faster than Mutsuki. Still, Alice chose to use her skills more for defense, becoming the designated stone wall of the team. With her, they managed to defeat another Jikochu, this time the equivalent of all those jerks who loiter in front of stores and hog all the outlets. With that, the Precure count was up to 3, though they were still short 1 suit for a full deck. But as it just so happened, Alice knew the potential identity of Cure's sword. In the next episode, we learned how Alice came to this conclusion through basic detective logic and fingerprint and DNA analysis. Alice, please never forget the words of Grandpa Picard, because those kinds of powers are much scarier than anything you could ever do as a Precure. And yet, as soon as I say that, she immediately starts to flex her checkbook again. Actually, Makoto just happened to have a gig at a television station owned by her father. And yet, as soon as they got to the studio, Alice's competency quickly ran out. On top of that, they lost track of their leader. Yeah, unsurprisingly, Ma let her inner fangirl take over, and she tried to recruit Makoto with the first chance she got. Still, I'm sure Mana won't take it too far, and just subtly hint at the fact that they're all Precure, and slowly but surely win Makoto over. Nanaida, the brilliant student council president who has all the social skills of a loser who does magical gore reviews on YouTube. I mean, don't get me wrong, I do kind of agree with cutting to the chase when recruiting a new party member, but seriously, Mana, try and use a little something called tact. And thankfully, this show doesn't just ignore such a significant fault of the main character, as immediately acknowledged through Makoto rightfully putting Mana in her place. Mana, as we've seen through these first few episodes, seems to have a hard time seeing the forest for the trees. She'll literally try going running in to solve a problem, and while that can work, as not everything is all that complicated, especially in middle school, she habitually ends up in the wrong mindset for problems like this. It is a flaw that she will have to tackle throughout the series, so good job establishing it in the 5th episode. Anyway, thanks to Makoto's manager, they learned how much love and passion she put into her art. This made Mana realize that she kind of trivialized her work and wanted to apologize for it. But before she could, it was time for the monster of the week, this time compliments of Mamon. You know, for whatever reason, I was expecting a monster duck to appear. Don't know why. Anyway, the reject from Digimon Fusion proved to be a difficult adversary as he could just spam flash attacks. He almost got an untransformed Makoto, but was saved by her #1 fan. Now that's dedication to a fandom. With Starmon distracted, Makoto managed to transform off-screen and defeated him by simply closing her eyes in an impressive showing. It's sad when you realize her inner Kenzaki would take over in the next episode. The next day, Mana received a letter.
DB?
What, is it from Toriyama? No, actually, it was a ticket from Makoto's manager to a handshake meeting. Mana took this opportunity to apologize to Makoto and do all kinds of things you really shouldn't do at these kinds of meetings. Granted, it wasn't the worst kind of fan interaction I've ever seen. I think you have to go to San Diego for that. Now, interesting thing about this season, originally, Makoto was penciled in to officially join the rest of the Precure around the halfway point of the season. Kind of making her like the 5.5 Ranger, you could say. And judging by how that last episode played out, it did seem like she was going to take more of a backseat for the preceding episodes until she officially joined. However, there was a little issue of the fact that she was already on the poster for New Stage 2. Thus, these next 2 episodes were likely moved up because of the Toy higher-ups. And yet, this would be one of the more tame examples of Toy's executive meddling. Makoto's next gig was to act as a guest chef for a daytime show where they would visit a local eatery. Wanting to learn a little bit more about Mana, Makoto requested they go to a family restaurant her parents owned. I'm guessing that bag of manju had their address written on it somewhere. Mana's father tried to teach her how to cook a classic omuraisu, a ketchup fried rice wrapped in an omelet, and yes, it's every bit as yummy as it sounds. It's not the most complicated dish ever, but since this was the episode where they decided to turn Makoto into a total dork, she would give Gordon Ramsay an aneurysm. Doki! Thankfully, this was only a rehearsal take, but this girl clearly needed nothing short of Shiro or Emiya to come in and teach her how to cook. Or in this case, a crash course with her soon-to-be teammates. And honestly, as someone who enjoys cooking, this plus Makoto actually cooking for the show was well done, so kudos. Back with the villains. Well, of course he'd be growing impatient. After all, this is only the 6th episode. Alright, I admit I'm exaggerating a little, as it's not inconceivable for an embodiment of greed to become impatient easily, but it's also clear what's coming up next was more meant for a mid-season finale. Anyway, Yero launched an attack, turning the hunger of a cameraman into a Jikochu, and obvious O's connection here. Anime is weird sometimes. Makoto transformed, revealing both her and her manager's true identities. They defeated the Jikochu with no real fight as it was too busy eating. With that, Makoto was just about to officially join the team when... Continuing right into the next episode, the Precure found themselves right in front of the big bad of the season. Luckily, King Selfishness, yeah, sticking with that name to distinguish him from the monsters of the week, had been petrified by the princes of the kingdom and wasn't going anywhere. This Trump Kingdom, as it was known, nope, I'm not gonna look at that low-hanging fruit, was once a peaceful kingdom where Makoto was both a warrior and a singer for the royal family. Through her job, she managed to grow close to the aforementioned Princess Marie Ange. But like many a Precure season, that peace was quickly spoiled when the baddies came in. Come on, Caster. Just because she dresses like Saber doesn't mean you should turn her into your personal plaything. Makoto tried to escape with the princess, but Marie sacrificed herself to protect her close friend. Again, while this wasn't Hibiki level executive meddling, it is still a crying shame that stuff this emotional wasn't saved for a little later in the season. Still, Makoto held on to the hope that the princess made it through the portal and became an idol in the hopes that her notoriety would eventually reach her and they could reunite to defeat the Selfish Kingdom. With King Selfishness slowly regaining his strength through the creation of his minions, time was of the essence. So Makoto probably did need to cut the loner act sooner rather than later. This became even more apparent when an army of Jikochu frogs attacked. Let me guess, they were all created from the Tsuyu fanbase. Because I can totally relate. Makoto, ironically enough, found herself in a similar position to the one from episode 2, but with a little extra assurance this time. Eventually, they reached the magic mirror that Makoto and the princess originally used, but Bell was waiting for them. He destroyed the mirror, and seemingly their only chance of returning to the human world. You know, I would put a Dr. Evil clip here, but the show does my job for me. Using some very roundabout logic, Mana pointed out that they could just use some of Bell's powers to get back. Yeah, let's see how that works out. Their fairy partners eventually found them, and for the first time, the 4 main Precure of the season were able to work together. Though Bell, to his credit, proved to be more than a competent opponent, only being taken down thanks to a conveniently placed mirror, and even then he could still go. Luckily, a small shard of the magic mirror was still active, and they just used that to escape. So yeah, all that talk about using Bell's powers to go back?
Well, that was pointless.
Regardless, the Precure's deck was now complete. Episode 8 saw the newly formed team gathering together to go see Joe. At Joe's shop, they stumbled upon a giant and really gaudy looking egg. Seriously, I don't think even Ran would want to hatch out of that thing. Though what did hatch out was just as marketable. Gee, I wonder if this mysterious toddler is going to play a significant role in this show. And of course, it didn't take long before they started showing off her toy gimmicks, I mean very important plot devices. Seriously, they're already making the Cure Lovelies, these things built up as really powerful relics, into the Cure Decors. Anyway, after Makoto left for her next idol job, Joe came back and Rika, being the only sensible one, asked where the heck the egg baby came from. Yup, definitely Memelin. The next day, they all met at the shop again. Makoto is formally introduced to the toddler, whom the rest of the Precure had taken to naming I, because Precure insist on treating their toddlers like Pokemon apparently. By the way, the best part of this episode was Davey trying to expose Makoto's honest feelings and giving the smuggest look ever. Later, Makoto tried her hand at getting more info out of Joe. Yeah, you're kind of a couple seasons early there, dude. They took Ai out for a walk, but like most toddlers, she ended up throwing a tantrum for no particular reason, so to calm her down, Mana tried singing a lullaby to her. Well, okay, I think Hitomi Nabatami is actually a pretty good singer. I especially love her contributions to the El Tama ED. Should I get around to reviewing that? Well, anyway, I'm sure she'll be able to put on a great performance. If you need to clean out your ear canals. To make matters even worse, Mamo launched an attack using the frustrations of a sleep-deprived salaryman, so of course this sheep Jikochu's power was. In case you couldn't tell, this is a Yoshimi Narita episode. Please try not to disturb your neighbors with your laughter. So it managed to put the Precure, and even its own creator, to sleep, but of course it had no effect on the OP toddler of the season, as is usually the case. So instead, the Jikochu tried to use plain old brute force, leading to Ai casting Awakening. It acted as a temporary solution, but the Precure still needed to snap out of it on their own. Girls, that's not sleepy acting, that's waking up from a bad hangover acting. Believe me, I know. Anyway, they defeated the Jikochu using Steiner math.
You take your 33 and a third chance, minus my 25% chance, and you got an 8 and a third chance of winning.
And Makoto, thanks to the power of motherhood, became closer to her new team. The baby saga continued into the next episode when Joe handed her off to Mana while he went to scout for some new products.
Deadbeat.
And to continue the chain of neglect, the Precure passed Ion to their fairy partners. Okay, to be fair, they volunteered for the job, but come on girls, I don't think these plushies can handle the god baby.
I've been violated.
Basically, the episode became 3 fairies and a baby with all sorts of shenanigans and whatnot. A bit of an irrelevant filler episode overall, with the exception of the Battle of the Week, which saw the Precure learning more about Ai's powers and how she could buffer their stats. This allowed them to win the fight with the sports team Chikochu by essentially cheating. Great lesson to teach the kids. All in all, not a bad episode, but really nothing special here, so let's just move on. Episode 10 is another mostly comedic episode, but on top of being relatively more plot relevant, it's also one of my early favorites. It immediately got some brownie points from me with this exchange. Yeah, after all, we all know that Mana's one true waifu is Momoka from Heartcatch. I should probably explain myself. Yeah, this isn't totally relevant to the show or anything, but it's still a fun little bit of trivia. Hitomi Nabatame used to talk about turning any predominantly female cast she was a part of into her own personal Yuri harem, in particular the cast of School Rumble. Ironically, most of them would eventually become Precure. And while she wasn't part of the School Rumble cast, Nabatame grew especially close to Shizuka Ito, Momoka's VA, whom she has worked with in a lot of other shows and even formed a unit with. And when Ito got hitched to a guy, she said they were just going through a divorce. It's hard to say how serious she actually was, as she too is currently happily married to a guy. She could be bi. Anyway, the main focus of the episode was Makoto transferring to Rika in Mana's class. Her intentions were fairly obvious for anyone who was paying attention, but of course, they still led to everyone gushing over her, and what is that? Okay, while the show isn't reaching smile levels, it still has its fair share of meme faces. Seriously, someone in production had to be trolling. Anyway, while the cookie episode started it, this was what officially solidified Makoto as this show's go-to gag character. I'm actually not against this decision, as it does give her something more to work with aside from being the stoic warrior. Though I have heard people complain about this shifting character, in particular blaming it on the presence of another character, but again, let's save that for a little later. All things considered, Makoto's first day in school actually went fairly well, with her even receiving some friendly greetings from her small, army-sized fan club. If only fiction and reality were a little closer. Still, while the fan club was behaving properly, same couldn't be said for the paparazzi. Well, at least this is one-to-one with reality. Rika acted as a distraction to let Makoto escape with Mana. It worked, but Rika couldn't help but feel a little off when Mana was hanging out with another girl. So yeah, Precure and TR stories are now officially canon. Just let that sink in for a little bit. Alright, maybe I'm exaggerating a little, and things will get a little less soap opera-y the next day. Kanashimi no mukoeto. Yeah, I'm not dealing with copyright strikes from Lantis. This also didn't sit well with the leader of Makoto's fan club, who was spying on a couple of middle school girls. Oh, don't mind me. I was just kind of in the mood to make some cookies, that's all. This obviously led to the creation of one of the most dangerous monsters of the week. Have I mentioned yet how much I love this episode? Seeing this pure embodiment of Japanese idol subculture made Rika realize her own true feelings towards the whole Makoto situation. To which Alice assured her that was perfectly natural, as even she was feeling jealous. Okay, I'm convinced. Nabatame snuck her way into the writer's room. Also, you guys can just drop off this friend talk. We all know what you're really thinking. Anyway, this led into an okay fight with everyone getting their moves in, though it was offset by all of the stock animation. Like, I'm usually not bothered by this stuff, but how slow was this beam attack going if both Makoto and Alice managed to fit in their entire sequences? Anyway, the episode ended with Makoto admitting that she was trying to get closer to everyone, not just Mana, and thus, everyone did get closer. How much y'all want to bet this is just step 1 in Mana's harem plan? And the results of this seem to take immediate effect in the next episode when Rika's husbando guard was in full effect. Well, okay, actually she was trying to prevent Mana from subbing in as the captain of the softball team. But as we've already established, no is not part of this girl's vocabulary. Now, from what I've read, this is one of the more divisive episodes early into the season, and while I do agree with some of the criticisms and will point them out, I do think some people overharp on a certain aspect that, again, I'm saving for next time. Oh boy, I've already got a lot of material to work with. But let's just focus on the episode at hand. Mana proved to be a more than worthy substitute for the softball team and even managed to raise the morale of her underclassmen. This did mean she had to sideline her student council duties, but Rika was willing to cover for her, more than likely just to secure her place in the harem. Still, things were going well for Mana, as she even got to spend time with Ai and Joe, who just gave her a new Cure Love ads. Okay, to be fair, I guess we can assume he found this thing during his so-called business trip back in episode 9, but A, they don't make that very clear, and B, would it have killed them to provide some actual build-up to what's going to become a very important power-up? They could have done something like had Joe admire this thing at the end of either of the last 2 episodes and had him say something like, "The time is drawing close," or something cryptically cliche like that. Anyway, he ended up giving it to Ai for the time being, but that quickly proved to be an unwise choice as she was soon taken hostage by Belle. He challenged Mana to fight him alone the next day so that they could settle their score from episode 7. A score that technically shouldn't he have with the entire team, as it wasn't just Mana who defeated him, but semantics, I guess. She complied with his demands as he was using Ai as leverage. And unsurprisingly, as a villain who embodies selfishness, evil charisma played dirty. Luckily, thanks to Alice's networks, the rest of the team quickly joined in on the fight. Bell, however, still had one ace up his sleeve. Rather than creating a Jikochu, he had created a method to merge himself with the monster. Jeez, they really are taking a lot from Blade. Still, considering what Tennoji turned into, this should be awesome. I really gotta learn how to curb my enthusiasm. I mean, seriously, just why? I get that they're mostly playing this for comedy, but why do it with a villain that up until this point they've built up fairly well as a legitimate threat? Actually, here's the most insane thing. They do try to portray him as a legitimate threat while looking like that.
Good night, everybody.
He tried to kill Ai, but then that new power-up that they so subtly hinted at came into play with the creation of the Love Heart Arrows, which only acted as a bow and arrow for half of this team initially. Then again, who says an archer has to use a bow and arrow these days? Yeah, in case you couldn't tell, I play way too much FGO. They defeated Belle and rescued Ai, but there was still the issue of the softball game that Mana was missing. At first, the team was kind of lost as they had grown reliant on her leadership over the past few days, but the first years who had been inspired by Mana's dedication decided to step up. One of them took up Mana's position and they won the game. So yeah, people have a lot of problems with this episode, especially the ending, but personally, it really doesn't bother me that much. At least compared to the other big problems that I pointed out that actually do make this one of the weaker episodes of the season. Still, let's just stick a pin in that ending for now, as we still got one more episode to cover for this first part. In the last episode we'll cover for today, Mana ended up taking in a disciple. Yeah, I'm officially calling Rika my spirit animal for this season. The episode pretty much played out exactly as you'd expect, with this kid named June following Mana around, hoping to garner pointers on how to be more of a man. Well, considering what Nabatami is usually typecast as. Yeah, good choice, kid. He also got a bit of a side benefit in being able to share in Mana's harem. Though unfortunately, that also included this dude. Yes, he swings both ways. Please hurry. Unsurprisingly, Jun became the victim of the week, with Ira taking advantage of his jealousy towards Mana. He didn't use the beast mode as it's known. Beast mode. Even though I'm pretty sure cell phones are more of a Decepticon kind of thing. To be fair, he does look better than the live action Dumbo. Yeah, seriously, this is the thumbnail they're using for their trailer. Again, in spite of the appearance, Yellow Dumbo proved to be a challenge, though thankfully they had much better animation this time around. Let us all take a moment of silence to mourn the dignity this villain once had. But yeah, this was actually a much better fight than the last one, as they worked off of Jun's inner turmoil. He had felt nothing but anguish over having failed to even come close to reaching his idol's level. However, that same idol admitted that she too wasn't an overnight success and was just like him at the start. It took her time to reach her current level, and Jun could do the same. Those few words reached the boy, giving the Precure the opening they needed. They defeated Yura, and with that, the episode ended with Jun resigning as Ma's disciple as he began to walk his own path towards not so much manhood, but rather maturity, I'd say. However, after saying farewell to a slightly persistent follower, Mana was about to get a big upgrade in the form of a full-on stalker. So those were the first 12 episodes of DDPC. Okay, she doesn't come out if I use acronyms. Anyway, in spite of some distractingly over-the-top moments here and there, I did still find this to be a very decent start to the season. As a start to a new series, it did exactly what it needed to do: establish its character and world, give each said character their own unique personalities, and form its own special brand of charm. In the case of that last attribute, it does kind of borrow from its immediate predecessor by being a bit excessive with its absurdity. Seriously, how did this get past the censors? However, it does balance it out with a surprising amount of story. Yeah, aside from arguably one episode, these first 12 episodes all provided a significant amount of plot progression. Now granted, part of that might have been because they were forced into getting Makoto to join the team sooner than originally planned, but in the end, I think they made it work. Heck, I didn't even really notice they rushed Makoto into joining the team when I first watched this show. Granted, now that I do know about it, it does bother me a little, as I kind of want to see how it would have originally played out. But I think I can forgive it, as it also meant we got more adorable Makoto as a result, and thus I could more easily connect her back to her namesake. Also, yeah, I really don't think some of the Kamen Rider references I made were mere coincidences, as many aspects of this show seem to borrow from the core tenets of some of the better Heisei Rider shows. This will become even more apparent in part 2 of this series of reviews. While the stakes so far have remained relatively low, some of our protagonist's ideals will be brought into question as a wild card is added to the deck. Next time, we'll cover episodes 13 through 24. I'm currently trying to break down these episodes by cores now. And we'll finally cover a subject that I was hinting at throughout this video. It's only appropriate that we ended this one with an Elephant Monster of the Week because... yeah, we gotta address the one that's in this room.